Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
ارتفعت حصيلة ضحايا انفجار 3 سيارات مفخخة وسط مدينة
The death toll from the explosion of 3 booby-trapped cars in the city center of Balad, north of the Iraqi capital of Baghdad, has risen to 110, among them 55 women and children. In the Hilal district south of Baghdad, 10 Iraqis were also killed, and 12 others were severely injured from the explosion of a booby-trapped car in a public market.
The small city of Balad, located north of the Iraqi capital of Baghdad, was a stage for the massacre caused by 3 booby-trapped cars. The targets were the families who were shopping and the vendors whose only crime is being Muslims and working next to the shrine of a man from the righteous lineage of the Prophet of Islam.
There were 3 explosions. There was about 5 minutes between each one. The first one exploded, and then 5 minutes later, the next one. Why is this? Why? We're asking the government and the Arab nations to help this country.
Armed men also launched 16 mortar rockets in the same area, creating the same level of damage as caused by the booby-trapped cars. The city was transformed into a display of charred and mutilated bodies, and among them are body parts for 22 children and 33 women who were out buying necessities for their children who, instead of going to school, met their death. The city's only hospital is not capable of taking care of the dozens injured who survived the massacre, thus forced to rely on medical support from Tikrit, the center of the district, as well as other surrounding cities. Throughout Baghdad, tragedies are reoccurring. Another booby-trapped car exploded in the center of the vegetable market in the city of Hilla. This took place near the site of another massacre that was carried out by the Jordanian suicide bomber last February. Today's explosion resulted in death and injuries among a large number of civilians and created massive destruction in the modest market.
There was my car over there, and there was a crowd, and the market was crowded. The suicide bomber was right there, but nobody caught him. Where are the security forces? Where are the police? He targeted the innocent civilians. And what did the children do to deserve this? What did the women do to deserve this?
Some political analysts who attempt to explain this war of annihilation against the Shiites no longer bother to talk about the identity of the perpetrators, who against all odds are made up of Ba'athists and the radical Islamist Takfiri group.
أكدت جانيس كاربينسكي مديرة معتقل أبو غريب السابقة أن خطوات
Janice Karpinski, the former head of Abu Ghraib prison, confirmed that few steps have been taken to prevent new abuses in prisons that the Americans control in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Guantanamo since the Abu Ghraib torture scandal. She confirmed that events that took place in the prison were not isolated incidents. Karpinski, who was reduced in rank from general to colonel after the Iraqi torture pictures from Abu Ghraib were exposed in a newspaper, said that the government has not appropriately dealt with the abuse shown in the photos. She said that what happened in the prison was not just the act of 7 undisciplined soldiers in the late hours of the night. She indicated that there was proof, which came out at the time, that showed that similar kinds of practices were being carried out in Afghanistan and Guantanamo. Karpinski said that she expects new pictures to come out, but not for a long time. She believes that this will provide an opportunity to have a more balanced review of the case and hold more specific officials responsible. Meanwhile, yesterday, a U.S. federal judge ordered the release of more abuse pictures that were taken at Abu Ghraib prison. However, the government responded by warning that releasing such photos will fuel anti-U.S. feelings throughout the world.
The top U.S. commander in Iraq disclosed that only a single Iraqi battalion is capable of independent operations and acknowledged conditions may worsen there even if a constitution is approved. U.S. Congress senators sharply questioned administration claims of progress in Iraq, zeroing on General George Casey's revelation before the Senate Armed Services Committee that only one Iraqi battalion was capable of operating fully independently. Casey said the U.S. military is putting Iraqi security forces increasingly in the lead of counterinsurgency operations as a part of the strategy aimed at reducing the U.S. military presence.
Today we expect to have 60 to 70,000 more Iraqi security forces available for referendum security than we had in the January elections. By the elections in December, we expect that to rise to about 100,000 more Iraqi security forces available for election security. As a result, I only asked for 2,000 additional forces to help us with this year's election process, as compared to 12,000 that I asked for the January elections. Reductions in coalition forces, condition-based reductions of coalition forces, is a critical element of our strategy. Right. And we certainly do look to do that over the course of the...
After years of civil war, Algerians overwhelmingly voted in favor of a plan of national reconciliation that would give amnesty to thousands of suspected militants. Interior Minister Noureddin Yazid Zerhouni announced today that 97.36% of those casting their ballots approved the Charter for Peace and National Reconciliation. Nearly 80% of Algeria's more than 18 million eligible voters went to the polls yesterday to cast their ballots in the referendum. Approval of the Charter also effectively puts a stop to all investigations into the disappearances of an estimated 18,000 civilians during the conflict. The plan calls for families of the officially acknowledged 6,000 disappeared to receive compensation of up to $60,500.
Israeli forces have killed 2 Palestinian gunmen and a teenager in the occupied West Bank as they pressed ahead with an offensive against anti-Israeli activists. The week-long wave of violence has jeopardized a 7-month-old ceasefire and deflated hopes that Israel's Gaza pullout might soon open the way for a revival of peacemaking. Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, part of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah faction, announced the deaths of the 2 gunmen over loudspeakers in Balata refugee camp in the city of Nablus, saying they were killed by soldiers in a raid. Troops later killed a 13-year-old boy when they fired on stone-throwing youths in the nearby Askar camp. The group declared that it was not officially committed to the ceasefire. An Israeli military spokeswoman said the soldiers had shot back after Palestinians fired at troops who entered Balata and nearby Askar refugee camp to arrest suspected militants in the pre-dawn operation. Yesterday, Israeli troops shot dead 3 gunmen in raids into the West Bank city of Jenin. Over the past week, hundreds of Palestinians have been detained by Israeli forces in sweeps into Palestinian villages and towns in the West Bank. The latest bloodshed came hours after Palestinians voted in a 3rd round of local elections in the West Bank. The polls are widely seen as a test of political clout for Hamas group ahead of a parliamentary ballot in January. The head of the Higher Commission for Local Elections said Fatah won control of 59% of the 104 municipal elections up for grabs. He said Hamas had 27% and other factions and won 14% of ballots. The results of which final official figures were to be issued in a few days were in line with opinion polls, which gave Hamas about 30% support, pointing to big gains when it takes part in the legislative elections. Hamas made a strong showing in the 2 earlier phases of municipal voting. The prospect of a key role for Hamas in Palestinian politics has raised eyebrows in Israel and abroad due to the group's refusal to disarm under the Roadmap peace plan.
Israeli occupation troops killed today 3 citizens at the West Bank city of Nablus after holding a large-scale incursion operation into the city this dawn. The child, Uday Tantawi, 13 years old, from Askar refugee camp, was shot dead by the occupation troops at Beit Furik checkpoint near Nablus. Israeli occupation soldiers also shot dead today the 2 citizens, Ala Yusuf Al-Tirawi, 30 years old, and Jamal Ibrahim Al-Jermi, 28 years old, during an incursion into the refugee camp of Balata in Nablus city. The 2 citizens were later in the day sent off to their final resting places. Special Israeli forces infiltrated both Balata and Askar refugee camp in Nablus city to arrest some citizens, where security sources confirmed the killing of the 2 citizens, along with the injury of a third critically and the arrest of 11 others. The second deputy at the Legislative Council, Dr. Ghazi Hanania, called on the international community to help the Palestinian people to carry out their democratic process of elections, which Israel always aims at hindering. During his meeting with a delegation from the Italian Napoli district, comprising the mayor in addition to more than 150 dignitaries of the district at the premises of the Legislative Council in Ramallah, Hanania asserted that Israel does not have the right to prevent any faction to take part in the legislative elections because it's an internal affair, urging the Italian government to pressure Israel to halt its continuous aggression against Palestinian people. For her part, head of Napoli municipality, Ms. Rosa Ierfolito, asserted that the Israeli crimes in Nablus governorate prevented her and the accompanying delegation to hold the annual festival in Nablus city, which called Days for Peace, asking Speaker of the Legislative Council to enable her to hold this festival in Ramallah city. Israeli occupation forces prevented tens of Belayim villagers in Ramallah from reaching their olive orchards. He added that the villagers, accompanied by international peace activists, headed to their orchard to pick up olive crops, but the Israeli soldiers banned them from reaching the farm. Head of the popular community in the village, Iyad Bernat, said the villagers and international activists organized a rally to cross the apartheid wall to reach the olive orchards, adding that the protesters managed to cross the wall and reach their farmland, although the soldiers assaulted them.
The Russian Defense Minister Sergei Yavinov had talks with Syrian General Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces Ahmad Ali Habib about the possibility of widening military and technical cooperation between the 2 countries. Ahmad Ali Habib arrived in Moscow on Monday, and on Tuesday he met with his Russian counterpart, General Yuri Palivosky, and talked about the mutual interests between the 2 countries.
In response to a question by a Russian citizen on live television, and in a clear indication of Russia's increasing military abilities, the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, announced that the Russian forces will be armed with modern missiles unmatched in the world. The missile system is capable of changing its trajectory and increasing its altitude. Experts and analysts believe that such talks focus on what is termed the future generation of missiles.
These missiles are without a doubt the weapons of the future. They can be used to enhance air and missile defense systems. Last year, Russia produced weapons worth more than $5 billion. For the first time this year, Russia will invest more money in modernizing its army than in selling weapons.
President Putin's statements coincided with the Syrian Chief of General Staff of the Army, Ahmad Ali Habib's visit to Moscow. He met on Wednesday with the Russian Defense Minister, Sergei Yavinov. Ahmad Ali Habib met earlier with his Russian counterpart, General Yuri Palivosky. Although the meetings were behind closed doors, a trusted source said that the Syrian side presented the Russian side with two lists. One of them included the kind of weapons and ammunition owned by the Syrian army and that is in need of fixing and modernizing. The second list was a list by the Syrian Special Army for modern Russian weapons.
These discussions in Moscow indicate that Russia will continue to cooperate with Syria, turning a blind eye to Israeli and American criticisms. Meanwhile, Russia is not selling Syria modern long-range air defense systems, which can threaten Israel. However, Russia will sell Syria spare parts and some short-range air defense systems.
Russian military leaders confirmed that the Sturlitz anti-aircraft missiles, which it will export to Damascus, cannot be considered as attack weapons, and that such exports to Syria do not tip the balance of power in the Middle East. It is clear that Russia is committed to long-term military cooperation with Syria, which explains why Moscow at the beginning of the year decided to cancel 70% of the total military purchases by Damascus, thus enabling the Syrian regime to resume buying Russian weapons on a large scale. Nile News TV, Moscow.
The Iranian parliament speaker, Ghulam Ali Haddad Adel, visited and talked with Lebanese officials. At the end of a long day of talks, they held a press release and issued a joint statement confirming the right of resistance and the importance of strengthening cooperation between Iran and Syria, and for Lebanon to stand up to political pressure.
وصل إلى بيروت صباح اليوم رئيس مجلس الشورى في الجمهورية الإسلامية في إيران غلام علي حداد عادل في زيارة رسمية على رأس.
This morning, the spokesman of the Iranian parliament, Ghulam Ali Haddad Adel, accompanied by a parliamentary delegation, arrived to Lebanon for a 3-day visit. The delegation was invited by the spokesman of the Lebanese parliament, Nabi Berri. The Iranian delegation was received by Lebanese parliament members headed by Nabi Berri, as well as members of the Lebanese-Iranian Friendship Preliminary Committee. Nabi Berri's representative in Iran, MP Ali Bazi, and the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon were also present. Following an official reception and a short break, the Iranian and Lebanese parliament speakers held a press conference in which the Iranian parliament speaker confirmed his country's support of the Lebanese people and rejection of foreign intervention in Lebanese internal affairs.
الهدف من هذه الزيارة تعزيز العلاقات بين الجمهورية الإسلامية الإيرانية وجمهورية لبنان.
The objective of this visit is to strengthen the bilateral relations between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Lebanese Republic, and to work with the Lebanese officials for the sake of knowing the truth. We also want to consult with the Lebanese officials to increase cooperation and bilateral relations between the two countries.
After welcoming the guest, the Lebanese parliament speaker, Nabi Berri, said that what is happening in Lebanon is due to an attempt by major countries to escape the problem they brought upon themselves in the region.
The visit of our prominent friend comes while Iran is facing a critical situation, in which it has become the target of a real attack to deny its right to have peaceful nuclear programs. This is happening while the Israelis are allowed to do as they wish and build a real nuclear arsenal for war. Some people are prevented from acquiring peaceful nuclear technology, while others are allowed to have military nuclear capabilities. We have seen the signs of Israel military objectives, as we are seeing today in Gaza and other areas. The Iranian visit also comes at a crucial time for Lebanon, following the assassination of the martyr Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, and while foreign countries are trying to dominate Lebanon in different ways. Some are even trying to use the assassination to put a plan in motion so they can escape from problems in Iraq, in Palestine, and other areas. In other words, we believe that what is happening in Lebanon is an attempt to escape from the realities that major countries have brought upon themselves in this region.
الأجنبي في العراق وفي فلسطين وفي غيرها. بمعنى آخر نحن نرى أن ما يحصل في لبنان هو محاولة انفلاش وتفلت من الوقائع التي أوقعت فيها نفسها الدول الكبرى في المنطقة.
رئيس الجمهورية إميل لحود وخلال استقباله المسؤول.
After receiving the Iranian officials, the Lebanese president, Emil Lahoud, said that the conspiracy against Lebanon aims at creating divisiveness. But he said that with the support of our brothers and friends, especially the country of Iran, Lebanon will be able to overcome this difficult situation.
Iran's parliament speaker underlined Tehran's opposition to all foreign interventions in Lebanon's internal affairs. During a three-day official visit to Beirut, Ghulam Ali Haddad Adel told reporters Iran backs the Lebanese people and is opposed to interventions by foreign parties in Lebanon's internal affairs. He met his Lebanese counterpart, Nabih Berri, who said the Iranian visit came as certain parties are trying to impose their hegemony in one way or another on Lebanon since the February 14th assassination of former Premier Rafiq Hariri. Berri, who heads the pro-Syrian Amal movement, has also spoken out against U.S. intervention in the investigation, while Lebanon's prime minister has appealed for help from abroad. In a historic move, more than 3,000 students from all political parties, youth associations in Lebanon gathered last night at Martyrs Square to voice solidarity with journalist May Shidja, who survived an assassination attempt on Sunday. Side by side for the first time, students from Hezbollah, Amal, Jama'ah Islamiyya and the Communist Party, as well as those from Future Youth, Free Patriotic Movement, Lebanese Forces and the Progressive Socialist Party called for independence, liberty and national unity. Candles from the word kafa, meaning enough in Arabic. Demonstrators displayed pictures of Shidja, slain Premier Rafiq Hariri, assassinated journalist Samir Asir and Communist Party member George Hawi. Lebanon's army has tightened control around the post of a pro-Syrian Palestinian armed group which faced pressure to disarm under the term of a UN Security Council resolution. Security sources said army units erected checkpoints and beefed up its presence around the position of Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command in Al-Niameh, just south of Beirut and the Bekaa Valley. The sources, which spoke on condition of anonymity, did not give further details. Palestinian sources said the army's move was unusual and described it as politically motivated. The Security Council's resolution 1559 demands the disarmament of all Lebanese and non-Lebanese militias, a reference to Hezbollah and Palestinian factions. During a meeting with UN Special Envoy Terry Ward-Larson in Egypt, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said he backed Resolution 1559. Lebanon asked 11 countries and the United Nations to help train its security forces after a string of bombings and assassinations that have fueled fears of a slide into chaos. Prime Minister Fuad Signora told a news conference after the cabinet's weekly meeting yesterday that Lebanon knocked on the doors of all the countries that could help. Following last night's cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Fuad Signora stressed his country was not facing an ordinary criminal, but said it would gather all the tools, training and expertise it could obtain to live up to the challenge. He said the countries which have responded positively to Lebanon's plea were the United States, France, Russia, Egypt and Qatar. The government has also asked for help from 6 other states, including Britain, Canada and China. 13 explosions have rocked Lebanon since the February 14th assassination of former Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, which plunged the country into its worst political and security crisis since the end of the 1975 to 1990 civil war. The issuing blasts have piled pressure on Lebanon's government to tighten its grip on security ahead of the final UN report into Rafiq Hariri's murder expected next month. Political bickering has stalled the appointment of security chiefs to replace pro-Syrian generals who lost their jobs in the aftermath of Hariri's killing and have since been arrested on the recommendation of UN investigators. They are now charged with murder in the connection with planning the attack, along with the current Republican Guard head and close aide of pro-Syrian President Emil Lahoud. Signora said the government made progress towards filling the general's position, but did not give further details.
Turning to the arts, Canadian-Israeli immigrants Susan Kogan and Fran Ovni broke into the Israeli folk music scene in the 1970s, and 35 years later, they're still harmonizing together. The two left Israel for wider pastures, but continue to sing in Hebrew, and Susan recently returned to Tel Aviv to promote the duo's newest album, The Merciful Moon. She told IBA's Viva Press how the mix of Hebrew and English melodies with a dollop of traditional Israeli music gave them a winning combination.
I think that the music business anywhere is difficult, and nobody can tell what will be a go and what won't be a go, and it doesn't even seem to be related to whether it's good or bad music. Our story happened very quickly. We started off singing in a nightclub in Yafo. We were the opening act for any bands that came through. Right away we caught the attention of people like yourself that said, I really like your music, can I interview you? That was the beginning of things. This song that shot us to Israeli stardom, The Second Bird, really expresses the Israeli soul.
You have a new album out called The Merciful Moon. According to your website, this is an album with songs of peace and celebration. What does that mean?
My friends Ruti Ze'ev and their son and two grandsons were all killed in a suicide bombing in Haifa a couple of years ago. On October the 11th, it will be the second year since this awful, awful event. And the CD is dedicated to them, and it's with the hopes to find light and life, and like Iris, Zevin Ruti's youngest daughter always says, the best revenge is to live well. And it was really in the spirit of making something beautiful to bring to Israel in this time of pain and difficulty.
Do you see this new release as a project as a whole, or are you expecting certain tracks to be individual hits?
The Merciful Moon is actually a song that was an Israeli hit years ago in the 70s. It was called Rak Hayarech Zorech, Only the Moon is Shining. It was from the Israeli Festival of Songs, and I was a young student on the scuba diving on the beach in Eilat. When I heard it, I said, this is going to win the festival. And I always wanted to record that song. On the English version of the CD, I actually translated, I didn't translate the song, but created a whole new words with the title The Merciful Moon. The third song, Keep On Walking, we have a clip that I hope you'll show. It's the next song that we have that we're releasing on the CD, and we hope that it will get a run for its money, and hope that it will be a hit. Who knows what becomes a hit?
You mentioned that you have both an English version and a Hebrew version of this album. Why did you decide to release your songs in both languages?
We released it first in Hebrew, first the Hebrew version, and then we've been talking for years, we're both Canadian, been talking about putting out a CD in Canada, and I said, you know, these songs are so beautiful. Someone, for example, began in English and got translated into Hebrew. A couple of other songs, his fourth song, Not By Might, is Hebrew and English on both CDs. Why not do the whole album in English as well? I thought it was a great idea. It took a little bit of convincing to convince Fran that it was a good idea, but we did it.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.